He's angry about mortgages. It's Angry Mortgage. He's swearing. He's cursing loud. He's old. He's opinionated. And he's been doing this so damn long. This program is about mortgages, and this is mortgage advice, but the advice may not apply to your situation. Contact licensed mortgage professionals for specific recommendations before you make decisions about mortgages. You may not agree with Ron, but if you don't, he thinks you're wrong. Oh, and did we say there is a lot of swearing?
Welcome, Francis and Josa of Tribe Financial, which is the first. You're a first.
A first?
You are a first. You're the first repeat guest.
Is that true?
That's true.
Come on now.
No, you're the first repeat guest.
I feel honored. It's like every time I watch your podcast, it's like I feel I want to do this like regularly with you. Only simply because those that know, those that don't know. You and I said this before, have a lot of conversations.
Yes, we do.
And I think a lot of our conversations, because it's in the moment, I wish we could have recorded them because they would make great fucking podcasts.
We are definitely recording this one.
We are.
So, look, the theme of today is scandal.
That's why I'm your repeat guest. It's a scandal that Francis is on this again. How could that happen?
It's scandal. Look, what we're going to talk mainly about today is there have been three very significant, to my mind, like public doesn't care sometimes, but most people listen to this are mortgage brokers and real estate agents. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, and by the way, the public, we love you. Keep listening. Thank you. Everybody who's not a mortgage person, a lender or a real estate agent, please tell your friends, because all these lenders and other mortgage brokers are going to send me no business at all. Okay. So
can I do a plug of my company and compete with you?
I said Tribe Financial.
There we go.
I threw you in. Okay. I was already there. All right. So there's been some stuff. Mm-hmm. And because Francis started when she was 11 in the banking world, because you were a banker in the mortgage business before you.
Yes. So I was a banker first, been doing this, for almost 3 decades now. And
started when she was 11.
Yeah. And as we talked about before, I feel like I've grown up in the housing market because my dad was a builder. So
you've been around.
I've been around. I've seen it. Even though I may not have been in the business, you hear the conversations and you feel it.
So 3 investigations or one just and sort of didn't get off the ground because the person kind of ran away. But 3 major investigations of stuff that got in the newspaper by FSRA. I say got in the newspaper. Let me explain that to everybody under 30. It's a large folding thing, okay, that's made of paper, but it's not toilet paper. It's newsprint. I'm just losing you, I know. So anyway, you can see it on posts. It's on Apple News. Okay, you can see it on Apple News. All right. If you're that age, that there's been some FSRA, who is our regulator in the mortgage business. And Francis, you and I had a different regulator for years, right?
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah.
FSCO, right?
FSCO, and then it turned into FSRA.
FSRA. Okay, so under FSCO, which is the old regulator, they were a gang of nitwits. Okay, no, they were a gang of nitwits. The managers, the bosses, gang of nitwits. I'll just put it out there. You always know that they're a gang of nitwits when the new regulator takes over, and because they had to have a new regulator because there's a big scandal called Fortress Developments.
Right,
okay?
That was the catalyst and changed everything.
Big catalyst, yeah. And I think the government was headed that way anyway. So it went from a bunch of provincial employees who run the provincial ministry payroll to a separate agency, which is what FSRA is. It's a completely separate agency.
In Ontario only. Let's clarify this. This is not
everything to do with
federal.
Mortgage brokerage. Everything to do with mortgage brokerage is provincial.
Correct.
Everywhere you go, it's provincial. By the way, they look after lots of other stuff.
Yes. Insurance.
Yep.
Credit unions.
Insurance is huge. Mm-hmm. Credit union is huge. Mm-hmm. And some types of provincially regulated pensions. Mm-hmm. Because I remember there's a pension department.
Yes.
Okay. That's a lot, folks. That's a ton. That's a very big, important organization. I would suspect mortgage brokers are probably the smallest part of it, really.
Probably.
Yeah, in terms of...
If you broke it down to a pie chart, it wouldn't be as big of a pie. Yes.
Although there are a lot of mortgage brokers,
right?
But versus insurance, because they do both, right? They do the property casualty and the life insurance if it's provincially licensed here. Okay, so they're big. It's big and it's busy, and I will say this out loud. They are a remarkable improvement on these gang of dipshits at Fisco. I mean, like, oh my God.
Hey, listen. When Fisco, listen. I'm gonna play the devil's edge here. Okay.
All right.
When Fisco first came out, let's be honest. The mortgage industry was not as big and vast of an ocean as it was today.
Much smaller, yeah.
Much smaller. And brokers didn't have as much of a market share. There wasn't as many of them. They weren't as prevalent.
Yep.
You tell me, you were around a lot longer in the broker industry. I was in the finance side of things. You didn't have these big conglomerate super brokerages that you have today.
You did not.
So it was, for what it was, I'd say, they had to grow up. And that's exactly what they did. They realized, like, hey, maybe we need to grow up here and actually have a closer set of eyes of what's going on in our industry.
Again, they did have some colossal fails, and I was involved in some of them. The huge killer fail was something called Fortress Development, where they were rogue operators.
Yeah, they were a huge red flag. I can tell you that.
Huge. I mean, and I have a vested interest in it because I cornered the enforcement boss at FSRA on 3 separate occasions, face to face in person, and told him they were fucking awful.
Did they listen?
Absolutely not. And the last time, when I first told him, he said, "No, I'm not. I don't know if they're so bad." And then once things started to heat up, the next time I confronted him, it was, "Well, we're investigating. We're investigating." And the third time, just before literally the shit hit the fan. It was it was just only 10 months before the RCMP raided the offices, for Christ's sakes, okay? Or the OPP. No, I think it was RCMP. That he said to me, "Well, this is up to the minister now." So he actually fucked off and put the blame on his boss.
Too much for him to handle?
No, he was just an asshole, okay? Just a complete fucking asshole, okay? I'm one of the few guys who said that he wasn't on the take. Okay, like everybody thought these guys at Fortress were slipping him tens of thousands of dollars.
No, sometimes people don't want to take accountability, and you know what? That will tie into the theme of what we're going to talk about today. Integrity and accountability.
Yes,
is huge, and it's not something that you can really properly regulate when you think about it. How do you regulate it?
By the way, that's a great point.
Right?
That's a great point because this is what I say over and over and over and over for all of these things when incidents come up and things go wrong. And people say, well, the regulator should have done better. Okay. I say the same thing every single time. You can't regulate bad intentions.
No.
When somebody decides to go rogue and do evil, you can have some picket fences set up, but you won't automatically find them. They've already watched how you've set up the fences and they've found ways through them. Okay. Right. This is a purposeful evildoers. It's not nobody catches them. Okay. There's no, it's not like that pre-crime thing movie with Tom Cruise in it where, they knew what the crimes were ahead of time. Okay.
Right.
Like you can't know what son of a bitch is watching your systems, looking at your methodologies to try to protect the public and say, I'm going to find a way around it. Bad intentions. Okay. Virtually impossible to stop.
But that's anything in life, Ron.
Yes,
right?
it is.
It is. 100%. It's anything. Like, problems don't arise until problems arise. Like, you cannot foresee problems necessarily happening, especially like with regulators. They're not in your business every single day. They're not in they can't be in everyone's business every single day. But usually they figure out things are not right when things start to go sideways. So, getting into these 3 individuals, it's not surprising that it's coming to light right now because let's be honest, we're not in the best real estate or mortgage environment right now.
Exactly.
Right?
That's so true. Just to quickly finish off on Fortress Development.
Yes, please.
Fortress Development, members of the public lost $400 million.
Oh, I know.
Okay. Like it's real fucking money. Okay?
Right.
Like serious shit. People whose life savings were lost. So I had a reason to be mad at the regulator. For sure.
You did, but at that point, then there's a question that comes up as a regulator, because it is a requirement as brokerages every year, as you know, to fill out air reports, right? And you're reporting in numbers. Would there not be a red flag and a jump in the volume to say, hey, maybe we should, like, not saying anything wrong is happening here. Maybe this is an institution or a firm that we want to take a closer look under the hood and do our due diligence, see, did they grow too fast? Is everything being operational and run the right way? Like, was that work done? And I would say the answer is no.
No, it's a definite no. And more to the point, I was not the only person warning them for years in advance that something was seriously wrong. I was not the only person to confront them, to write letters, to... That's another thing. It's just a pen. It has ink in it. I'm just trying to keep the young people on side here. So, there's...
they should know. People use crayons when they're young, okay?
Same no, it's too far. No, I don't think... I think the young ones won't anymore. Like, I don't think there'll be any crayons used. If you're born a year ago...
Right.
I don't believe you will know anything about a crayon, a pen, a pencil.
Fair point.
Nothing.
Yes, everything will be on an iPad.
It'll be on a tablet. Yep. Every single thing will be on a tablet.
Right.
So anyway, but moving on to the present day.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a new regulator. That's 5 years now, right?
About that, yeah.
About 5. They're good people. I mean that sincerely. I'm not just kissing up to them, because they've done serious work. That's the truth.
They have, and you know what? I give them kudos because they're really trying to turn things around. They're trying to inform the consumer. The campaigns that they're doing, I think, are brilliant.
Yep.
Their website, the revamping that's been done on that. So again, for consumers, there's very, easily followed, like frequently asked questions of what to do in certain situations, to look up individuals. So they are trying to do their best to control the waves in the vast ocean that we're in today.
Yes. And wonderfully, if they discover something that looks bad on the surface at a mortgage brokerage, they'll go deep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're not afraid to do a full force investigation, apply manpower, call in hundreds of files, do the work, and if the people are doing wrong, they will publish it.
Right.
And we went for. I don't think Fisco ever did that once. To be honest with you, I mean, they'd wait till somebody got arrested for something. Like, I remember in the old Fisco days, they were told about an evil-doing mortgage broker in Hamilton. Never forget this one. For on about 10 years that this guy was a bad dude. Okay, and when they finally got around to taking act. By the way, they did an audit of him, and there was 386 wrong things that they flagged him on.
Not a lot, right?
He promised not to do it again.
Okay.
But they got put on the spot. That old regulator, Fisco, got put on the spot where a sergeant in the Hamilton police force called them and said, you need to go to this man's office tomorrow because we're arresting him.
Interesting.
Because he's doing sexual assaults on his clients.
Oh, okay. Yes, I know this.
You know this one.
Yes, okay? I do know this one.
So he's sexually assaulting his clients. So we're going to go down and arrest him. And I feel you should immediately come down here, seize his records because he's doing all kinds of illegal things. We've seen endless evidence of it. And you need to come down and close his office and seize his records, and you need to do that. So Fisco said, no, we might get to it in a few months, but we're not going to. He said, fine. The sergeant said, I know this happened. The sergeant said, if you don't come down tomorrow when we arrest him to shut his office, I'm going to the newspaper, and I'm going to name your name, who I'm talking to, that you refused to take action. You said no, you're not going to do anything.
And I take it that woke them up at that point?
They showed up the next day.
Right.
And they closed the office and seized the files. Yes.
Wow.
They got the drift of what was going on. But it took that. There was so many complaints, not even a slap on the wrist, just a promise not to do it again. And then finally, this horrible person is sexually assaulting his clients. Mm-hmm. And the police are arresting him. And Fisco, you need to come down here and shut this down, or I'm going to get you in trouble, Fisco. Like, you're going to do what you're told for once in your life. And they finally did. So that was not a great experience with that organization, in my opinion. Anyway, we got much better people now.
Yes, we do.
Much better people now who take it serious. And that's all you really should ask for, right? Take it seriously.
You have to listen. If the regulators aren't going to take this stuff seriously, how can we write our industry at the end of the day? Because what most people don't realize is there's ramifications for this behavior that echoes throughout our whole entire industry.
100%.
It makes our jobs more difficult. It makes lenders' jobs more difficult. And it makes the consumer experience more difficult for them when it comes to good quality clients coming in that rightfully should be getting a mortgage, having to go through more of a stringent process in order to process their paperwork.
Because the more bad things that happen, the way we operate Canada is, this applies to so much, the way we operate in the Western world is, we just put everybody through the ringer.
Of course, because at that point, who do you trust?
Well, but also at that point, we are not allowed to do profiling.
Right.
Like we're not, in the Western world, we can't say,
true,
I think you look like an evildoer, so we're going to check on you.
You're a woman. You can't know what you're doing, so I'm going to put you through the ringer. No, I'm kidding.
Look, and nobody should take this the wrong way. Like I was one of the first guys that said from the very first day that the Toronto cops carding people was absolutely fucking wrong. So I don't believe in that kind of profiling. But I believe that if you look at somebody who has a ton of complaints, or you look at somebody who is offering the way they do business in a way that you could only describe as nuts.
Right.
Okay. Like if someone says, yeah, I'll give you a mortgage in 24 hours. Okay. Like someone should stop and look into that.
Correct.
Okay. Because that's nuts.
Right.
Okay. So yes.
Or the ads where it says no income, no credit, we can get you approved in 24 hours at bank rates.
Yep. Let's
red flag there.
Yes. Let's red flag that. Absolutely. So, but that's not the way we roll in Canada. The way we roll in Canada is we don't believe in looking at something and saying that looks suspicious.
Right.
Okay. So let's start to get to cases. I'll start with what I think is, because you just brought this information to me today. So I was very interested to hear it from you. We'll start with the case of Claire Drage and the Lion's Share Group.
Right.
Now, we've talked about it on the podcast before. This is a case where hundreds of people would appear to have lost their money. Sums it up? Is that about?
Sums it up.
Okay, so this is
it looks like to be the case. It's not done, but I don't know where this money's going to get recovered from at this point, from what I can see.
In fairness, I still get calls from some of those people who say, I still don't have any money.
Wow.
You know, like it's been 6 months since
Right.
I haven't seen a nickel. Okay?
Right.
So a quick recap for everybody. Claire Drage is a mortgage broker out of Burlington, Hamilton. Is that right?
I think that's right. That sounds about right. Yeah.
That's the area. And a company called the Windrose Group. Okay. And she was a very active mortgage broker, promoting the ideas of BRRRR. That's buy,
renovate, rent,
refinance,
rent,
and rinse.
Rinse,
repeat. Okay. Like
rinse,
just
repeat.
keep doing
Exactly.
it forever. Okay. So the idea that that people should buy investment properties, refurbish them, add suites, increase rental income, and then refinance them and go off and do the next one. Okay.
Which has become very popular over COVID. How many of those info webinars you see out there of come and get into real estate? You could be a multimillionaire. Do you know what it reminds me of? The Tom Vu ads back in the day.
Tom Vu. Nobody here again knows Tom Vu except you and I. That's it.
Right? It's showing our age. You remember those after-hour ad? He's on a yacht with 1,000 women's in the Ferrari, and you can make millions like me.
And all these women in bikinis, that's what comes of. You remember the bikinis, right?
I remember that.
I'm a man, so I remember the bikinis. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So what happened was in the promotion of this idea, she would promote it to her clients, to the general public, that it was a great idea to be involved in buying properties, renovating them, renting them out, that kind of work. And obviously, there was a golden year, 2021. I mean, that was rampant. Okay?
Yeah.
And to do a lot, because some of the properties that she was advocating for, or that eventually the people who got she arranged private mortgages, because in some cases, these places are too beat up for a bank to do a mortgage.
Well, absolutely. Private mortgages there were some issues with the private mortgages, yes, but I think more the glaring issue with all that, what I've read up on it, was the promissory notes.
Promissory notes, yes, that was the final capper disaster. So the idea of doing this stuff is, when it got to a really hectic, like frenzy stage, was that you bought a piece of crap house in Sudbury.
And these were all northern properties, if I understand correct.
There was some Hamilton stuff. There was some Hamilton stuff, but it was always the worst part of Hamilton and the most beat up properties. Okay,
right.
With the concept being, it was so bad, so beat up, like in different. Like it wasn't just Sudbury; it was just Sioux and Timmins and a whole bunch of other places. So buy these very not nice properties with the idea that you're going to fix them and add suites to them or add extra bedrooms, and you're going to amp up your rental income and then do it all over again. So she fell in with a particular group of contractors and landowners and people who specialized in this, who would appear they also stole people's money. That's, in other words, that she could give money through first mortgage. She has to do private mortgages to buy the properties that were beat up.
Right.
And then in the end, and there were hundreds and hundreds of them.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was like over 500. Okay. And through these particular people who also were running the renovation, and then they were all sort of involved, and it's possible some of her family members might have been involved in those companies, but I'm not a detective, so I don't know. But these companies, those companies all went broke. They applied for order protection. They went into order protection. They're corporate. And then it turns out there were people who gave promissory notes, which has no security on the property.
Right.
And those promissory notes were, the idea behind them was to do the renovation. So because, all right, to explain this succinctly, folks, is when you do 2 mortgages, you have to have a ton of paper.
Correct.
Which is necessary.
Even on privates, let's be honest, dealing with our mix, we're still doing due diligence.
And you have to have full disclosure, and you have to have appraisals, and you have to document loan to values, and it all has to be within rational scope. Okay?
And most importantly, let's throw in there, because we are dealing in the world of privates, I think the most important thing with privates that a lot of people overlook is exit strategy.
Right.
What is the realistic plan?
Right down to a budget.
Yeah.
Right down to a budget, right down to dollars and cents, right down to, at the end of this is going to be the new rent, and we've done all the studies of the area. This is what rents come in. It's not just a fantasy. It's like precise. It's like we buy the property. Here's the budget for the renovation. Let's break down the renovation. There's a long list of what we're going to do. There's a bunch of costing associated with it.
What's the value of the property post renovation?
Right. And then what is the rent potential in the area? You could do it all perfectly, or you could do it all bullshit. So I think we know the way it was done. Okay.
Right.
So promissory note, using promissory notes frees the person who's doing the lending from paperwork, from disclosure as well, because in a promissory note is what it says, folks. It's a promise to repay.
So, let's just explain in layman terms. It's like, Ron, I'm going to give you $100. I'm going to write a note that says, Ron, you promise to pay me back $100 at a 10% interest rate on this due date. Do you hereby promise? Yes, I do. And you sign it, and then we're good.
Or we might pinky swear too.
That too.
That could happen.
Right. Yeah.
So, but there's no security. There's no house being mortgaged. There's no title being attached to. There is no actual security. There's no legal instrument.
There's no accountability.
None. Okay. So I think she ran out millions of dollars worth of those. And she actually signed some of them as the personal guarantor of these things. So, and then it all just went wrong. The contractors didn't do the renovation. The people who she helped buy the properties, I think
the stories that I read, there was Instagram accounts of them partying down in the islands in Vegas,
I don't know, like people were
popping champagne and spending money,
yachts and private jets. Like I said once in the podcast, there's a Ferrari rule. If the investment advisor ever shows up in a Ferrari to your meeting, don't give them any money.
I agree.
There's also a private jet rule. If the investment advisor or the owner of the company doing the work for you says, let's go fly private to Vegas, don't give them any money, okay? Do not give them money. So this was one of those things. So just to summarize, everybody loses. It would appear that the promissory note people appear to be completely wiped out. Millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Well, because they have no security at this point.
No, it's a promise.
If the individuals have gone bankrupt, The companies are
Companies have gone bankrupt.
Companies are going bankrupt. The properties are going to be sold. They're going to be covering off their mortgage positions first because that's where the security is, whatever value's there.
The receiver's going to move to sell off the properties. The
Right.
mortgages have to be
promissory
repaid.
note. I can't, listen, I'm not a lawyer, but I can't possibly see what leg those poor people have to stand on at this point to get any of their money recovered.
They have none. For those that Claire signed personally, they can go after her. I'm sure. I think probably they won't get any money from her.
Well, they won't because she filed for bankruptcy as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. I knew her company had filed, but I didn't think she'd filed personally.
There was a listing because when you file insolvencies, they do like an ad in the newspapers, and that's what I found. Now, I did see, again, can't say it's Kerr, but the name was Claire Drage is the one that I saw for the notice of insolvency that was in the newspaper.
Okay, so,
So I would assume it's the one and the same individual, right?
Now, you also did the research to determine that Claire Drage is no longer a mortgage agent or broker.
Correct. According to the FSRA website, her license has expired.
So when the time came to reapply in March, she did not reapply.
That would be a safe assumption.
Yeah. So there's no longer anybody to chase. FSRA can't chase her. They're not.
No, but I mean, here's the interesting thing, because the way that the company, and it's even states this in the article, because one of the articles they actually called FSRA and asked what they're going to be doing with this investigation. And they said, actually, this would be more in the scope of the Ontario Securities Commission.
And by the way, I do know this. There's a bit of an argument about promissory notes in the Securities Commission.
Right.
There is a bit of an argument.
Okay.
Now, the Securities Commission can go after people for violations of their prospectus on the first mortgage side, the private mortgage side, because she ran a mortgage investment corporation.
Right.
So there's some problems. She could run into some problems there from the securities. But I'm telling you, when I tried to figure out who is actually the regulator of promissory notes, it's looking like there is no regulator.
You're probably absolutely right.
Like the pinky swear promise on a piece of paper to pay my money back does not have a regulator.
True, because when you think about it, promissory notes, I think of it from the scope from my experience working at a bank, right? You come in, want to do a debt consolidation loan for $20,000.
Sure.
A lot of times those loans are unsecured.
Yep.
You have a promissory note and you have a promise to pay, right?
Right.
So they could send a collection agency after you to try to collect their money at that point because they don't have any
But
security.
there's no security has been attached.
No,
Okay.
but I mean, this is an interesting case that makes me wonder, is FSRA now going to be looking at adding additional regulation into promissory notes? I'm going to probably assume, Ron, that if they're, the age-old saying, if there's usually one fire, there's usually more fires in the forest lingering away.
I am sure there's more fires.
Right. So, my question out there to the regulators, are you going to put in any sort of regulation when it comes around to promissory notes right now? Because I'm sure this is being utilized today in our industry and even outside of our industry, that people that are unregulated. And what are you going to do to protect the consumer at the end of the day?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they'll figure out something, but I know that when a regulator has to step into a space that the provincial government has not told them they're in charge of, they've got some issues. Okay.
Right.
Now they could probably, I'm only guessing, and that this would need research, and I might be totally wrong, but I'm thinking they could just say a mortgage broker cannot involve themselves in promissory notes.
And that would be the simplest solution.
But again, promissory notes are not within their purview.
It's not, but I think it's why is that not a fair statement, just to come out and say that promissory notes are outside of your jurisdiction? You're not allowed to be dealing in that type of transaction.
It may still take a legislative change, unfortunately.
Interesting.
Okay, so that's one, and that was a total disaster, but it's sort of resolved itself in the saddest possible way, that the people who've lost money will absolutely lose their fucking money.
There is, but I still believe, Ron, I think there's more to come. I do believe that the OSC is probably investigating this. And you and I both know investigations like this take time. It's not like it happens overnight.
Exactly, which brings us to something that I covered on a previous pod, but the investigation into Forest City Funding and Bill Hansen in London, Ontario.
Right.
So that was a big blow to a lot of different people because of the fact that company had been around so long. Now, again, we have to put things correctly. What was issued was a notice of proposal from FSRA, which stated they've completed the investigation. They came to some conclusions. They outlined fines, license suspensions, all kinds of other provisions. but that is subject to appeal.
Right.
You can appeal to the tribunal, and that could take, I don't know.
Would it be, but here's my question, Ron. If an individual gets arrested out there for fraud, are they not still subject to defending themselves in a court of law?
Yeah, but actually they have more protection in some ways than with a regulator, because when the police arrest you and the Crown proceeds with charges,
right,
they let you go the next day, and there's a whole bunch of rules of evidence and a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen. And actually, they don't even let you go the next day. They let you go the same day, because fraud is something where you sign an agreement to appear. You sign a promise to appear. So,
but my point on this being is, for FSRA to get to the point to issue a notice, they would not do that unless they felt they had cause.
Took 2 years.
I understand that,
2 years
but they would not do that unless they felt they had serious cause to do that. Is that a fair statement?
That's the correct way to look at it. Is they published the results of their investigation.
Okay.
And they published their finding, and they published what their actions are. What they said is, we're going to fine, we're going to suspend, and this person can't be a principal broker anymore,
right,
for at least 3 more years, and then maybe he can never sign. Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff, okay,
right,
and serious. And if you read the finding,
which I did,
it's very detailed.
It is very detailed.
Okay, and when you read the finding, it is the result of reviews of thousands of pages of documents.
Right.
Okay.
Going back to my point, they're not going to issue a notice without doing their due diligence and their review.
But we still have to say that the person is innocent until the end of the appeal process.
I'm not indicating whatsoever in this. Like, listen, I don't know Bill. I know of him. I've never met him personally. I'm basing my judgment just purely on what I'm reading in the notice from a scope of an individual such as myself that's been in the business.
You have expertise.
For 3 decades, and also understanding the governance and the requirements under the act of being licensed as a broker, and what the requirements are, such as, Section 10 of the act, which says, as a principal broker and a broker in general, to sum it up, is you are required to be operational with honesty and ethics.
Yes.
Those 2 key things, honesty and ethics. And if they feel that you're not on side with either honesty or ethics, FSRA does have the right to say that you are not suitable to be licensed at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And you have a right to appeal. At the end of the appeal process, if the appeal is denied, then you're gone. I mean, the NOP stands. The Notice of Proposal stands.
Right.
So I actually met Bill a few times.
Okay.
Excellent golfer. But
that's why I don't golf. See, okay. I don't meet people, because anyone that knows me, I drive the golf cart. I don't golf.
So, I don't golf either. I just drive my wife around. She golfs.
Okay, well, there you go. Fair enough.
At the end of the day, good golfer, seemed like a very nice guy. But at the end of the day, the finding was very detailed, and if you read it carefully, it absolutely states within the finding that the principal broker agreed to several of the situations. He agreed, yes, that happened. Yes, that happened. Okay. Not entirely. Okay. But on certain specifics. Look, it was kind of shocking, because it's a 36-year broker. It's a long time. And it's the boss of a large operation with over 300 agents. Okay. And also commingled problems with both the brokerage in terms of the paperwork and of the actions, and similar difficulties with the Mortgage Investment Corporation, which was operated by the same person. Okay. And that's a real conundrum, because that's 2 different things that are off the rails if the appeal is found against. Okay. And that's, one of the things that you and I hate is that you can make a decent living at this without doing any bad things.
Of course you can.
Fine living. Okay.
Absolutely.
No need to do any of this stuff. No need to call a lending fee a mortgage premium. I mean, there's no need to pretend a gift to take a private mortgage and pretend it's a gift. I mean, there's just no goddamn need to do it. Okay.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, I listen. I don't know the clients that are involved. I don't know what their situations are right now in this circumstance, but I can only guess you potentially put consumers in harm's way. You know, I'm going to guess that a lot of this probably came to light because of the state of the real estate market right now. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think his operation predominantly is in the London area. Is that correct?
He's kind of province-wide.
Okay, province-wide. So I don't know where these transactions are, but there's certain segments of the market right now where real estate has gone down in value.
Yes.
And, you know, when these things come up for renewal, it's like, okay, what is your loan-to-value position? Lenders behind the scenes are always auditing their portfolios. I don't know where these mortgages were booked, but, you know, let's assume if it was a mortgage finance company, there are, you know, a lot of the times these mortgages are securitized. They are constantly looking at their books and their securitization to see what positions that they're in. They do these soft checks behind the backgrounds that consumers and even brokers are not aware of, that a lot of the stuff can then get uncovered. Then all of a sudden they're at risk in their portfolios at the end of the day. But the biggest risk is to the consumer. From what I understand these situations, Ron, I mean, you're setting up first position mortgages and then putting seconds behind it, going greater than 80% loan to value. When you're in a flat or declining market, what does that mean to the consumer at the end of the day?
Well, more interestingly, many of those lenders have specific clauses in their first mortgages
that say no secondary
That's
financing.
no secondary financing, and
Right.
there is one. There is some.
So again, you know, if I'm looking at it as a scope of trying to be impartial and from experience of looking at this, you know, the biggest thing that FSRA looks for, and like I went back to with Section 10 of the Act, is that you're operational with honesty and with ethics and with integrity. It's written in there.
Sure it is.
How in this case can you say that you were operating honestly, ethically, or with integrity? If you are a veteran mortgage broker in this industry and you are cutting corners, I think you really need to do a hard look at yourself in the mirror to ask why you truly are in this profession. And I hope they understand that we should be doing better as an industry.
Well, particularly since Bill's a millionaire, like Bill's rich.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you know you really got to bring that to the surface. I mean, like, and again, subject to appeal. See what happens. Look, you know, it's in some ways it's awful in this way. That because it's published, and this is public record. I want to really point that out. This is public record. Of
course.
Everybody in Ontario.
I looked it up last night and read the notice.
It's
Yep.
right there.
Yep.
Okay. So at the end of the day, every single lender who did a first mortgage for that organization in the last 5 years is pulling those files.
Of course they are. They have their radar up right now. But they're listen, every single lender is pulling those files because I'm sure every single one of those lenders are getting called from their investors with concerns as well.
Some of them were banks. I mean, some of them
Right.
were banks. I mean, like at the end of the day, the file's got to be pulled, and come on.
But it goes back to Ron, what I was saying. It's the concern of the fact that now you're putting in jeopardy their securitization on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. Like there's a bigger ramification here that I think most brokers don't truly understand of the impact to our industry.
The impact to our industry of, you know, for all the brokers and agents out there, when you start to wonder why there's just so much investigation of a file, maybe this will tell you why.
Totally.
But there's got to be there's things that are being done in a completely wrong way.
You and I both know that after this, right now moving forward, if you have a gifted down payment, it's going to require us extra due diligence and verification of that down payment.
You would think, yeah.
I'm going to call it out right now. Anyone that's listening to this after the fact, you can tell me if I'm right or if I'm full of shit and it didn't happen and I'm blowing smoke, but is going to cause more process, more paperwork at the end of the day.
And more paperwork for borrowers. More pain for
absolutely.
borrowers. So pain for everybody out of bad acts. That's
Right.
as simple as that. Oh, brings us to our, speaking of bad acts,
Yes.
brings us to the final chapter in this, which won't be the final chapter, but it's the final chapter today.
Right now.
Now, Harold the Mortgage Closer.
Oh, this is my favorite.
Harold the Mortgage Closer. So Harold the Mortgage Closer was the subject of a big, again, it's a newspaper, but you could find it on Apple News, of a big expose by the Toronto Star about, you know, people who seemed, an elderly woman who seemed to have been victimized by a construction guy who took hundreds of thousands of dollars through mortgages that Harold the Mortgage Closer facilitated And she didn't end up with a finished house in the end. And
Well, she ended up spending, I think the number got up to, correct me if I'm wrong, 1.1 million
it's real money.
for renovations. Ron, you
Well,
and I both
hold
know
on,
you could have built a new house for that and then some.
But what also happened is 1.1 million.
Right.
But the money advanced through the mortgages was only about 500 and some odd thousand.
Right. Correct.
So somewhere, some other money went away. But we can't do too much on that file right now, that particular file.
Right.
Because both the borrower and the evil contractor have both passed away.
Right. Yep.
So that sort of closed itself. Now, what has subsequently happened in the last 10 days is a further investigation by FSRA of Harold the Mortgage Closer, which has resulted in a new NOP. And once again, we must stress that NOPs are subject to appeal. And the appeal will take some time and could absolutely, possibly result in FSRA is all wrong and Harold's fine. Okay. Currently, Harold has no mortgage license.
Right.
That company their license is expired on the website, and they are not able to do mortgage business in Ontario. But in the reading, if I just verbatim reflect on what the readings in the finding are, that there were 5 separate cases, of which the one we just discussed was one, and 4 others, where based on a lengthy investigation of documents and on specific complaints from the borrowers, that mortgages took place, mortgages were signed off on, and there was a consistent pattern that several of them had no documentation. The claim in the NOP is that the application was reviewed and information was taken and a mortgage was offered, and then when the person arrived at the lawyer's office to sign, everybody has to sign for the mortgage at a lawyer's office, that Harold the Mortgage Closer was not involved, and it was in fact his wife's company that was issuing the mortgages, with no, in at least 2 cases, with no disclosure documents being signed.
And she was never licensed.
She was never licensed.
No.
So part of the NOP is a finding against her. Okay. Again, subject to appeal. But that's the simple truth of that investigation. It might be wrong. It could be wrong.
It could be wrong, but I'd be curious to know in those circumstances, like you said, with no documentation, that's one red flag to me, because you're not doing your due diligence, regardless if you're lending your own money or not. There should be due diligence that's done there at the end of the day to see suitability for the consumer to ensure that you're providing the right solution. In 2 of the cases in the findings, they said two of the complaints actually were able, thankfully, to refinance out to far better mortgage types of products. That is why, as a broker, you are required to do your due diligence on privates. It's not just slap it on, worry about it later. Is there a suitable product out there that is better for the consumer at the end of the day? Number 1. Number 2, there was no exit strategy in some of these cases. Like, there were situations where consumers were giving mortgages where they weren't even in the position to have any proper exit strategy coming out of this. They probably should have been told at that point. Maybe it made more sense at that point to actually sell the property and take the equity out and not lose a big chunk of it to fees and interest.
Interestingly, there was another consistent pattern. The what we refer to as APR. Where APR is a interest rate calculation based on all fees that are inputted into the mortgage. Because you can have an interest rate and then you have to think, well, if that's the interest rate and they're also charging me 10 grand for this, 20 grand for that, 15 grand for something else, then if you add those fees together and then calculate them as an interest rate,
what does that work out to be?
What is that number?
Right.
That's the APR.
Did you see these APRs on the notice?
I did see the APRs. I think the lowest APR I saw was about 30%.
Right.
Ranging to 80%.
Correct.
Which is, if it is actually 80%, is possibly in violation of federal law about usury.
Correct.
Okay? So in other words, you can only charge so much interest. Now, we could go a long time on this one, but at the end of the day, I think to sort of wrap it together, all of the issues revolved in these three cases did in fact revolve around private mortgages. Mm-hmm. So I think our message to the public, who's not just, well, first of all, our message to mortgage brokers and agents and people who are listening in the industry is, do not fucking do this. Okay, do not do this stuff.
Right.
Do proper disclosure.
Yep.
Make sure the mortgage is suitable. Research every fucking option before you recommend a private mortgage. See if there's any bank who is willing to do it, any alternative lender, institutional alternative lender. Do the right thing by the client in every single case, even if it's time-consuming and onerous. Must do it.
That's our job.
The act says to do it.
But Ron, that's our job
at the end of the job.
At the end of the day.
That is our job. And also, you don't need to do evil to do fine in this business.
Correct.
Okay, I've said it earlier in the podcast. I repeat myself. You do not have to do evil to do well. You don't. It's just unnecessary. And as these three cases do illustrate, you can probably do evil for a while, like years, but you will get caught.
Well, I think the turning point in our industry is going to come the true day of reckoning, because it's coming. We just don't know when. It might be as early as beginning of next year. It could be a little bit longer.
That would be the optimum.
You know where I'm going
yes.
with this.
Yes.
Is digital verification.
Digital verification of income through CRA.
Correct.
Okay, which we've talked about on the pod many, many times before, which the recent Liberal budget promised in their housing proposals that was right. It's in the document that there will be an investigation to arrange digital, accurate confirmation of income from CRA to major lenders.
Right. And if you want to get a better understanding of how someone's operating their business, I'll just say it, because I told you the circumstance that I just saw during a presentation, whether it be with a mortgage broker or whether it be with a referral partner, bring up the fact that the digital verification is going to come and see what the reaction is. Yeah, like you and I, when we hear it, we were like, great. When can we start tomorrow? It's gonna make our job simpler.
I testified before Parliament.
You did. So. But to me, a red flag for anyone in the industry listening to this, if you're bringing up digital verification and someone's fighting you tooth and nail of why this is a bad idea,
or like you had, if a hand flies up in a presentation and asks, do we know the date? I'm trying to get in under the wire. Okay?
Correct.
Yeah,
red flag.
When is the date that happens, guys?
Red flag there again, right?
Yeah.
Or the other question I told you that I got, how are consumers going to get approved? My answer was legitimately.
Yeah, how is anyone going to get a mortgage in Ontario if we can't do fake income documents? Yeah, that's a red flag. Yeah, that's a definite red flag.
That's a red flag. But, you and I have talked about this. I'm a firm believer if this got introduced, it would have such positive impacts, not only on our industry, in the process of us doing things, it would actually stabilize, not completely solve, but stabilize a bit the housing market as well, and the craziness that we've seen.
And it could do a great benefit for house values, because people who did not really qualify for a mortgage can't get that mortgage anymore through nefarious means, through fake income documents. And in my most simple thought is that you and I every day, and all of our teams are consistently telling some people, you can't get that big a mortgage. You don't qualify.
Right.
You can't buy that big a house. You don't qualify for that mortgage. This is something that goes on 100 times a day in Ontario.
And we're very comfortable in doing it.
And we have to do it. This is what it is. But for those people who are using fake income documents, everybody qualifies for everything.
I understand, but this is where a lot of these brokers may or may not realize, or don't give a shit to realize, but I actually care, is I have had to be on the other end of people in tears right now in the current interest rate environment, crying to me on the phone that they've made a mistake. They trusted their broker. They don't know. They say they don't know. They shouldn't have gotten this mortgage. They disclose everything to me. They are not making the income. They can't afford these payments.
Because the renewal payments are much higher.
Because the renewal payments are much higher. Like, I don't know if this is a lack of experience in our industry, but individuals when
no, but if you're making up fake documents, you never care what happens to the consumer in the end. Okay?
I guess not. Or they believe that interest rates would stay low for a very, very long time.
Whatever.
But there's a difference between low and normalization of interest rates. Like consumers right now that I'm seeing, even if their rate went from their 2.99 to 4.99 or 4.5, they'd still be in trouble. They don't have the extra bandwidth there on the income. That is the reason why they're going to get the no's. And it's not to say they can't get into the housing market. They just can't get that property they want right now. And we're protecting the consumer. We have to think that way as an industry. It is so important. Ron, if we don't start thinking this way as an industry, we're going to start to hurt ourselves. We really are.
To summarize, when bad actors do bad things with private mortgages and promissory notes, they are jeopardizing the consumer, and they are, in some cases, jeopardizing the investor who's going to lose their money. They are harming consumers in some cases with outrageous interest rates and improper descriptions and bad disclosure. And that's all wrong. It's all wrong. It's ridiculously wrong. And it looks like FSRA is coming for you. Okay. And the final thing, to summarize, is that fake income documents hurt everyone. Mm-hmm. People who got their house are happy temporarily, but in many cases they won't stay happy. And finally, that thanks to FSRA for taking these actions, and federal government of Canada, we are watching you. You promised to do this linkage to CRA. You published it. It's there. It's easy. Like, CRA actually has a budget for it. They've looked at it. They understand what the costs are, and they're quite manageable. It's not like that Arrive scam motherfucker who wants to charge $68 million to do this change. It's not hard, okay? Not hard to add this system. They actually make the banks pay for most of it, okay?
Right.
So, folks, these two things, private mortgages, be very careful. Ask for a second opinion. Everybody asks for a second opinion on a private mortgage. And Government of Canada, we are watching. We are not going to take our foot off the gas on this. There must be linkage to CRA. We have to end income document fraud in this country. End of story. That's it.
Look, Ron, you summed it up beautifully, and that's exactly it. You have two veterans here that have been in the business a long time. You and I have both been a huge proponent of digital verification. We're screaming it from the rooftops. Right. I truly hope they start to hear our voices and understand that this will be meaningful and impactful to start to right-turn the housing market, help our industry to better serve our clients at the end of the day. I got into this business because I truly believe that individuals should be working with mortgage brokers, that the good mortgage brokers like ourselves and the others that we know in this industry actually do care about our clients and giving them proper advice and proper solutions. My last call to action on this would be to the brokers out there that are not, please stop. Like, I'm actually begging you to stop. Stop worrying about making your $1 million and driving your Ferraris. Have a little bit of integrity and honesty when you do your business, and stop lying. Just stop lying. Just
stop it. And Francis and Josa, Tribe Financial, second time on the pod. Congrats. Okay. All right, folks. See you next time.
See you next time.
If you like the pod, well, don't just sit there. Go to YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and all the other ones and like the pod. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep being angry at mortgages and swearing about mortgages. Angry Mortgage could use your support.